Minutes. Man, I'm excited. I'm thankful for tonight. It's been a good week so far. If you haven't heard, a couple things to be excited about. Number one, Pastor Jamal got engaged on Friday night. And so I don't think he's here tonight. I think he's actually recovering from the whole process, but he's engaged. We have 3 single pastors on our staff, and so a lot of our prayers have involved those 3 guys. And so to see the Lord answer the prayer and Jamal to be engaged, and we don't arrange marriages, but if we could, Adriana would be someone that we would arrange for Jamal. But he's engaged. If you see him, you can congratulate him for that. Second thing I'm excited for is this Thursday, Thanksgiving. I don't know about you, but I love Thanksgiving. I love to eat. I love getting together with family and friends, football, all that Thanksgiving's about. I'm excited that we get to this Thursday take a break and celebrate and say thank you to God for all that he's done. Some of you may enjoy Thanksgiving for the turkey. I don't know if you're the turkey people. Some of you are the dressing people. To be honest, I'm not a dressing person. I don't know if that makes you judge me or not, but I'm not a big dressing person. My favorite part of Thanksgiving comes down to two food items that I look forward to every year. And it's a little bit strange, a little bit different, but I want to just throw this out there, let you consider it, and maybe for your own Thanksgiving meal it will help. One of my favorite things about Thanksgiving, my grandmother taught me when I was about 5 to get mashed potatoes, and not just normal mashed potatoes, but this is like mashed potatoes with like a full stick of butter, just these nice fluffy mashed potatoes, and fill half of your plate with those mashed potatoes, right? So have some turkey, have some dressing, but mashed potatoes, and when you put the mashed potatoes on your plate, make a big mountain. But there's a secret that she taught me that's changed everything for me. She said when you put them on your plate, in the middle you want to push down and make it into a little bowl, right? So you get a big mound of mashed potatoes, make a bowl, and then you get some green beans. And really it's best if the green beans have been cooked in bacon grease. You put the green beans in the mashed potato bowl. And I'm telling you, if you do that, your Thanksgiving will be on a different level this year. So just remember I said it, the bacon grease is a big deal, the butter and the mashed potatoes is a big deal. So that big helping of mashed potatoes and green beans I'm looking forward to on Thursday. The second thing is that on Thanksgiving, things that are typically called dessert are called salad. And so we're going to go to eat with my mother-in-law and father-in-law. They make dessert, but on Thanksgiving we get to call it salad. And they make a salad that is actually Jell-O. And it's Jell-O, but underneath the Jell-O. This may seem weird to you, but I promise you, try it. There are crumbled up pretzels underneath the Jell-O. And so if you were to see my Thanksgiving plate on Thanksgiving, it'll be half mashed potatoes with green beans in it, a little bit of turkey, a little bit of dressing, and then a mountain of Jell-O and pretzels. So the staff makes fun of me. They say I eat like a 5-year-old. Maybe so, but Thursday's going to be a good day. I want you to imagine, so Thanksgiving, we kind of know the drill by now. If you've been around for Thanksgiving very long, you kind of know what to expect for Thursday. You know if your family will be on time, if they'll be late, you know kind of what food to expect. You kind of know what the climate will be like around the Thanksgiving table. We've been through Thanksgiving long enough that we kind of know what to expect. We kind of know what Thanksgiving's about. It's this day where we look back and thank God for all that he's done. It's a day that began in the 1600s when the Pilgrims were celebrating the first harvest in a new world. So we're so familiar with Thanksgiving that all of it is just kind of normal to us. And we go into the day and just experience one more Thanksgiving in a long line of Thanksgivings. I want you to imagine that this year at your table, in the middle of the celebration, in the middle of the meal, some family member or some friend stands up and they make an announcement that all of this is about me. Right? So for some of you, it's not that hard to imagine. Like you can imagine that actually going down, that you're in the middle of the turkey, in the middle of the dressing, in the middle of the Thanksgiving, and they stand up in the middle of the meal and they just make this simple announcement. All of this, all of Thanksgiving, all the food, all that we're doing, all the symbolism, it's all really centered on me. Right? For some of you, you're like, man, I've seen that play out. I know exactly what that's about. But the reason I say that is we're in the middle of this section in John where the Jews are essentially celebrating their version of Thanksgiving. Their version wasn't one day. It was actually 7 days long, called the Feast of Tabernacles. And if you've been here over the last few weeks together, you've seen over and over again, Jesus is standing up in the middle of their Thanksgiving celebration where they were looking back on their freedom from Egypt. And over again, he's saying, we're not just simply looking back on freedom from Egypt. All this is about me. All this is about me. So the bread of life, they would have known the bread of life. It's God provided manna in the wilderness for 40 years for our people to eat. We celebrate with bread because God provided bread. And Jesus is standing up and saying, you know what, the bread that you look back on, that's a part of the celebration, but more so, I'm the bread of life. If you want to be alive, if you want to understand what this is fully about, it's not just looking back on when God provided manna in the wilderness. This is about me being the bread of life for all of humanity. And then in chapter 7, they would have had this massive water celebration where they would go to the pool of Siloam and bring water out, and they'd have this massive parade through town and then pour it over the altar. And it was a celebration meant to look back on when God provided water from the rock in the wilderness. And so they were familiar with that. It would have been a celebration where they would have been praying for provision for their crops for another year. And Jesus again stands up just like he did for the bread of life and says, if you're he who is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. I'm the water. Right? So in the same way, it seems insane if someone would stand up and say, this Thanksgiving is all about me, we would think that they were crazy. Jesus is standing up in the middle of the Feast of Tabernacles, and it's why we've entitled this part of the series, Offensive Jesus. He's standing up over and over again saying that bread of life that you're celebrating, that thing that you're looking back on, it's actually trying to point you forward to me. That's about me. I'm the bread of life. That living water that you celebrated from the wilderness, that was an event that we look back on and we say thank you to God for providing for our ancestors. But it was actually pointing you forward to something much greater, and that much greater thing is now I am the water. If you come to me and drink, that I'll fill your thirst. And so what I want you to see as we jump back into John 8, that's really what's going on here. Jesus is claiming that all of this 7-day ceremony, this 7-day celebration was all meant to point to him. And you can imagine how angry that made the religious leaders. We see it over and over again in this passage. But Jesus is stepping in and telling them that the feast is not just a look back. The feast is actually a look forward to this day and to all that Jesus would do and how abundant that would be. See, I want us, as we step into Thanksgiving week, for us to kind of think about that Jesus is telling us not just to look back, as much as it's great to look back and to thank God for what he's done. As much as it's helpful for us to thank him for the good old days and all that we look back on and celebrate, Jesus is telling us this is not just about looking back and celebrating. This is actually about looking forward and anticipating that I've got even more for you. Right? As great as the past has been, that when you look to the future, I have so much more for you. And I want you to understand that this is just the beginning of the better things that I have for you. Right, that was a helpful message for them, and I think it's a helpful message for us that we look back and celebrate, but we actually are looking forward saying, you know what, God's going to continue to do even more than he's done before. Right? The reason that's important for us is that Christianity is not a backward-looking religion. Right? We look back and say thank you, but we are looking forward to something much greater than anything that's behind us. Monuments and museums look back. Movements look forward. And Christianity is not a monument, it's not a museum, it's a movement where we look forward and say, God, because you've been so faithful in the past, we anticipate so much more in the future. We see where you're taking us and we trust you. And even when our world gets shaky, we believe in you and we trust you. And so I want to look at John chapter 8, verse 12. And we're going to look at just one verse. If you're a note taker, on our website there are notes. I talk fast when I get excited, but you can follow along there. We're actually supposed to cover about 18 verses tonight, and I really think I'm only going to get to one of them, and so the notes may be helpful. There's also some devotionals on there for all the stuff that I don't get to tonight that you can jump into as well. But I wanted to take our time tonight with John 8:12 because it's another one of these claims that Jesus made, like I'm the bread of life and like he who is thirsty come to me and drink. It's another one of these claims that is so loaded and so incredible that I want us to take our time listening to it and walking through it. So John 8 verse 12. Look at Jesus' words. He says, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. I'm the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. What I want you to see tonight is that Jesus is going to tell us three things. He's telling us something about the world. He's telling us something about himself, and he's telling us something about ourselves. Something about the world, something about himself, and something about ourselves. And I want to just kind of break that down for you and help you understand what it means when Jesus says, I am the light of the world. Right? It's such a broad metaphor that I think we hear it and it sounds nice and it sounds like, okay, that's comforting, but we don't really think about the fullness of what he's saying. First, about the world. Second, about himself and his role in the world. And then third, about our lives and what it looks like to live in the light. Right? So in order to fully understand this, again, you have to see this in light of this Feast of Tabernacles. And what I want you to do is we need to go back in time about 2,000 years to when Jesus said this, and then go back about another 1,500 years to what he was talking about to really fully get our minds around why did Jesus say this? Is it just a random metaphor that he came up with, or was this rooted in the story of Israel and the story of humanity? Right, so to go back 2,000 years, when Jesus said this, he said it at the end of this great feast, and the way that the feast would end, the Jews would set up 4 massive candelabras in the temple courts. Right, 4 massive, they were 75 feet tall, and they would put 4 massive 75 feet tall candelabras in the courts of the temple, and at the top they would put this massive bowl of oil. And at the end of the temple, the last night of the feast, they would have men climb up these 75-foot ladders and light the bowl of oil, and it would bring light to the entire temple courtyard. Right? We tend to not really think that that's that cool because we live in the age of electricity. In that day, you didn't do anything after night because it was dark. But that night in particular, every year the lights the candelabras would be lit up, the entire temple courts would be lit, and it would be this time of exuberant worship looking back on what God had done for them 1,500 years later, or 1,500 years earlier. These massive flames lighting up the temple courts, exuberant worship. And what they were looking back on and worshiping was 1,500 years earlier, God had sent a pillar of fire to the people of Israel to lead them out of slavery in Egypt. You may remember the story if you've ever read and really dug into the story of Moses. Remember, the people of Israel are slaves in the land of Egypt, and God goes to Moses and tells him that he's going to use him to deliver the people from the land. The problem was the people of Israel had been slaves in that land for 400 years. It was their only existence, was slaves in the land of Egypt. So you may remember God goes to Moses and tells him that he's going to be the one to lead them out, and Moses argues, and then there's the part about the plagues. And then finally, the people of Israel begin to leave the land of Egypt after the Passover. And they get out of the land. And what I want to do for a moment is just to get you to think about, as the people of Israel left the land of Egypt for the first time, where we think there was around 2 million of them. As 2 million people leave the land of Egypt for the first time and leave the borders of Egypt and step into the wilderness, I don't think we really feel what it would have felt like to be them in that moment. Right, for 400 years, their only known identity as a people were slaves. They did what the Egyptians told them to do. For 400 years, longer than the United States has existed, that was what they were. That's what they did. And all of a sudden, God shows up and tells them, I'm going to deliver you. And it's this God who they probably had heard about, but I'm assuming at this point in the story, if your people had been slaves for 400 years, you're beginning to question, is this God a real God? Are the promises that we've heard that he made to our ancestor Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, are those promises true, or are these some kind of cleverly devised myths to kind of keep us motivated as slaves? And so they leave the land of Egypt, and all these things are swirling through their mind. They're doubting God's existence, or at least this God who exists. Does he even care about us? Are his promises true? That they're stepping into this new season of life, and they're looking back, and pretty quickly in the story, we'll see how quickly they get overwhelmed by fear of what may happen to them. That they get afraid of the Egyptians who are going to come after them. They get afraid of what does life look like now that we're outside of Egypt. And then there are people who wants to be free, but think about that. They don't even know what free is. They've always been a people of slaves. The doors of the prison have been opened up, and they step outside, and it's the first time they've been outside. And it's not that they don't want to be free. They don't even know what freedom means. They don't know what life should look like. And so all of that happens. And in response to that, I want to just read 3 different little parts of Exodus. Because in response to all of that, God sets his people free, but in the midst of their doubt and in the midst of their fear, in the midst of their powerlessness against their enemies, against their anxiety about what the future looks like, and their confusion about the future and about what it means to be free, God acts, and that's what this holiday was about. And he acts by sending this massive pillar of fire from the heavens to show them that he was with them. Look, this is on Exodus 13. It'll be up on the screen behind me. But 3 different scenes that I want you to see, that this pillar of fire, this light from God, showed up and it changed everything for them. All right, Exodus 13, verses 21 and 22. It says, the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, that they might travel by day and by night. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night did not depart from the people, or from before the people. Right? So this pillar of fire, if you're wrestling with doubting God's existence, the pillar of fire probably answers that. Right? If you're a person who's lived in Egypt and you've heard these rumors about a God who loves you and has chosen you as a people and you're struggling with doubt of, does God even exist? God sends this tangible reminder where every time doubt crept in, they could look back at the pillar of light and say, you know what? I think he's real. I don't think we've made this up. I don't think these stories are fairy tales. There's a pillar of fire literally everywhere we go. It's with us. If you're a person who begins to doubt God's faithfulness to his promises, that every time you move, you look up and there's a pillar of fire there, God steps in and to the people of Israel says, I know that you doubt. I know that you're filled with confusion. I know that you don't really trust that I'm faithful to my promises. And so I'm going to send you a tangible sign, a pillar of fire, so that every time you get filled with doubt, I want you to look back at the pillar of fire. And so the people continue, and I want you to look at what happens next, not just the presence of God shown through this pillar of fire. Exodus 14, we get to the part of the story that's probably the most popular part, that the people, the armies of Egypt change their mind and they begin to chase down the Israelites. And the greatest fears of the Israelites are being set forth. They thought, man, we're going to die now. Look at Exodus 14, verse 10. It says, when Pharaoh drew near, the people of Israel lifted up their eyes. And behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they feared greatly. And the people of Israel cried out to God. They said to Moses, is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you've taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done in bringing us out of Egypt? Is this not what we said to you in Egypt? Leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians, for it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. This voice of fear. Why did we do this? Why did we step out? Why did you convince us that this was a good idea? Listen to Moses' words, verse 13. And Moses said to the people, fear not, stand firm and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. The Egyptians who you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You only have to be silent. Right? Terrible military strategy. But that's Moses' strategy. Be quiet and be still and be silent. You're about to see God do something that's going to convince you that you don't need to be in fear. So what does God do? And don't miss this. I think we miss the pillar of fire in this story, but listen to what happens. The Lord said to Moses, why do you cry to me? Tell the people of Israel, go forward, lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, that the people of Israel may go through the sea on dry ground. And I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they shall go in after them. And I will get the glory over Pharaoh and all his hosts, his chariots and his horsemen. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gotten glory over Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. Look at verse 19. Then the angel of the Lord, who was going before the host of Israel, moved and went behind them. The pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them, coming between the host of Egypt and the host of Israel. And there was the cloud and the darkness, and it lit up the night without one coming near the other all night. So do you see when the Jews celebrate these 4 massive candelabras in the courtyard of the temple? They're celebrating the presence of God, that the tangible presence of God is made known through this pillar of fire. And that's amazing. But this second part is even more amazing as the Egyptians, the most powerful military force in the world, starts to chase them down. It says that the pillar of fire actually stands in between for the night, the Egyptians and the Israelites, so that the Egyptians can't advance. Right? So if you're an Israelite thinking, I don't know that God's going to fight for us, the pillar of fire steps in. If you're an Israelite saying, man, I don't know that we have the ability to be free. I don't know if we can do this. I feel powerless and weak against the military of the Egyptians. And the pillar of fire steps in and says, this isn't about your strength. This isn't about your might. I'm going to do something. I'm going to defend you and protect you in a way that you could never defend and protect yourself. And then look at how the story ends. Verse 24. I'm going to skip a few verses. It says, in the morning watch, the Lord in the pillar of fire and cloud looked down on the Egyptian forces and threw the Egyptian forces into a panic, clogging their chariot wheels so that they drove heavily. And the Egyptians said, let us flee from before Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians. All right, the Israelites are wondering, how is this going to work? And they were so filled with fear, so much so that they were telling Moses, let's go back and die in Egypt. That'd be better. And in the midst of that, God steps in and says, no, I'm going to fight for you. The most powerful military force in the world at the time, they don't lift a sword and they defeat them. See, God is showing his presence. He's showing his power. He's showing his protection for them. And then I want to read one more verse so that we can move on and apply this. But Exodus chapter 40, verse 36, at the end of the book of Exodus, it wraps it up. And again, it's all about the pillar of fire and how God made himself present among them. Verse 36 of Exodus 40 says this: throughout all their journeys, whenever the cloud was taken up from over the tabernacle, the people of Israel would set out. But if the cloud was not taken up, they did not set out until the day that it was taken up. For the cloud of the Lord was on the tabernacle by day, and fire was in it by night, in the sight of all the house of Israel throughout all their journeys. I don't know if you caught what that just said, but remember, I think one of the big things that the Israelites were wrestling with was, we want to be free, but we don't know what free means. And we want to go to our own land, but we don't know how to get there. We don't know when to go. We don't know how to go. And if you caught what that just said, the pillar of fire was there saying, hey, listen, when I move, you move with me. When I stop, you stop. You're not going to find your way into freedom. You're not going to find your way into the promised land. I'm not giving you this map where every day you're going to walk a certain amount. Your job is to stay focused on me, and when I move, you move. And when I stop, you stop, and I'm going to lead you to a place that you couldn't find on your own. I'm going to go before you and guide you and show you that there's a way to freedom, and that I came to guide you from slavery into freedom, one day at a time, one step at a time. All you have to do is stay with me. All you have to do is trust me that I know what I'm doing. I know where I'm going. All right, so do you see what Jesus was doing when he stands up in front of these massive candelabras? That to the Jewish people, the candelabras represented in this story God's protection, God's presence, God's provision, God's power, God's guidance. They were looking back and they were celebrating this time where God showed up for their nation, and he was all of that. For those of you who doubt my presence, I'm present. For those of you who doubt my power, I'm powerful. For those of you who doubt that I'm going to protect you, I'm going to protect you. For those of you who doubt my guidance, that the pillar of fire is going to step in and guide you. And so when Jesus was standing up saying, I'm the light of the world, he didn't just randomly choose a metaphor. He chooses the part of the story that the Jews would have said, man, I remember that part of the story, but I don't know if that's how God shows up for me. I don't know if life feels like that. And I think the same things that were falling on the Israelite people were falling on the current crowd that Jesus spoke to. The doubt that God cared, the doubt that God existed, the doubt that God would be faithful to his promises, the feelings of powerlessness and fear that come along with that. The wondering if God's going to protect us, the wondering if God's going to guide us. And all these thoughts that I think were true in the wilderness for the Israelites were true for the people that listened to Jesus. And I'm pretty sure they're true for us today, right? That we look back and we see these massive stories of God doing what God does, but on a day-to-day basis, it's so easy to wonder, is God really faithful to his promises? Is God really going to give me power to overcome these enemies that keep stealing life from me? Is God really a God who chooses to guide his people a day at a time and a step at a time on this journey from slavery to freedom? Right, the story of Israel is the story of all of us, slavery to freedom, but the journey from slavery to freedom involved doubt and fear and anxiety and all these things of wrestling with, do we really trust God that he wants to do those things for us? And what Jesus is saying when he stands up and says, I am the light of the world, he says, I don't want you just to look back with thankfulness. That's part of this. But I don't want you just to look back with thankfulness for the time that God showed up. I want you to look forward in hope that there's something much better ahead of you. And I don't think there's any better message for us on Thanksgiving week. I don't want you just to look back with Thanksgiving as much as that's what part of this week's about. I want you to be a people who looks forward with trust and who looks forward with hope and who looks to me to see there are much better things ahead of us than anything that's behind us. But this is the story of Scripture, that God has something in front of us that we can be thankful for and grateful for in advance. All right, so I told you, I want to tell you that this tells us something about the world, something about Jesus, and something about ourselves. What it tells us about the world is that the world is dark. And Jesus is just making this statement, I am the light of the world. What's implied in that is you live in a dark world. And the same feelings that surround Israel when they left the darkness of Egypt, the same feelings that they wrestled with in the darkness of this world, you will wrestle with because the world's dark. You will wrestle with doubt. You will wrestle with, does God really exist? And if he does exist, is he a God who's faithful to the promises that he's made? You will wrestle with fear because you're going to come across enemies that feel so much bigger than you and that you feel so powerless to take on. You're going to feel powerlessness and wonder, will God really protect me? Will God really come through for me? You're going to feel the anxiety that comes with having to trust a God who leads you a day at a time and a step at a time and feeling the whole time, is this real or is that make-believe? Is he really leading me? Is he really guiding me? Is he taking me on this journey from slavery to freedom, or am I playing games with myself? He's talking about the world. It's dark. And I don't know if any of you are still afraid of the dark. I think as kids, we are afraid of the dark, but then when we're grown up, we act like we're not afraid of the dark anymore. Right? So when you're a kid, you're afraid of the dark, right? You can just be afraid of the dark and not be ashamed of it. I remember when I was a kid, I was afraid of the dark, but I wanted to be tough. But I would get in my bed, and there was something about having my covers completely over me except for my head, right? You don't let an arm hang out. You don't let a leg hang out, because that's where things come out from under your bed and grab you. Right? I needed the closet door to be completely shut. Right? And then as I got older, I kind of grew out of that. I began to say, you know what? I don't need to be afraid of pretend things. I think when we get older, we realize that maybe the pretend things were more real than we like to acknowledge, and then we try to act like we're not afraid at all. But I'll tell you what's going to happen tonight. I'm going to go home from church. Monday is trash day in my neighborhood. So when I get home every Sunday night, I go and grab the dumpster and I roll it up my driveway. My driveway is kind of a long driveway up a hill, and right beside my driveway is the woods. And I pretend every single time like I'm not afraid. But man, if you jumped out at me, I would probably try to roundhouse you or something would go down. But I'm always going up, and I like to pretend that I'm not afraid of the dark. But I think a lot of us, we pretend, but there's something there where we recognize, man, the darkness is scary. When I was 16 years old, I had something that when I thought I was over my being afraid of the dark happened, and I realized that I wasn't unafraid of the dark. I was 16 years old. I went to camp in the summers at a place called Kanakuk. And for the older kids, you got to go on this incredibly epic trip. And part of the trip was they took you into a cave where you got to go explore and be a spelunker and just have a great time. And so I remember showing up to this trip. And when you go, they tell you to wear long sleeves, to wear long pants. And then you show up, and there were about 20 or 30 of us, high school age guys. And they hand out the little helmet, and the helmet has a little spelunking light on it, and so you feel like completely legit. And this guide came out, and he said, okay, here's what's about to happen. We're going to go into this cave, but the only way into the cave, there is about 100-yard long opening that's about 1.5 feet tall, and you're going to have to get on your belly and scoot your way through. And I remember thinking, can I go back, right? Can I get back on the van? By that point, we're all out there, so we're kind of committed. And so you get in there, and really there's this opening that's about 1.5 feet, 2 feet wide. You get on your belly, and for 100 yards, about a football field, you scoot your way through. And the guide told us all you're going to be able to see is the person's shoes in front of you. Just follow the shoes in front of you, and you'll be fine. And so we would go, and then every now and then someone would get claustrophobic and freak out, and you get kicked in the face. And like underneath you there was gravel, and then every now and then there would be really cold water that would flow through the gravel. And I remember being scared to death of like, man, what happens if this thing falls? What happens if there's all these thoughts going through your mind. And I remember making it through the little opening, and it opens up, and at the end of the 100 yards, there's this massive opening. And it looks, it's probably as big as like the grand ballroom at SFA, this massive room. That's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. And we got in there, we were all so relieved to be out of the little confined space and to be in the opening, and we looked around for a little while. And then the guide said, okay, everybody come around. I need to do something really fast. So we all came around the guide, and he said, everybody give me your light. And I think all of us at once realized this guy's got us in a cave. He can do whatever he wants to us. He's trying to take our lights. But we complied. We handed in our lights. And he said, here's what I want to do for a little while. He said, I'm going to leave my light on for a minute, but I want y'all to spread out. I don't want there to be anyone within 20 feet of you. I want you to go spread out. I want you to sit down, and I'm going to turn my light off. And for 30 minutes, no speaking. Don't move. Don't speak. I want you to sit for 30 minutes. And he said, I want you to feel what complete darkness feels like. He said, you've probably experienced relative darkness if you've been in a really dark place, but complete darkness is different from relative darkness. You can't see your hand in your face, in front of your face. And I want you to feel what that feels like. And so we spread out, and I remember that 30 minutes, it felt like I was there for 3 days. You're standing there and you're literally putting your hand in front of your face. You can't see anything. Your eyes are trying to adjust and your eyes are starting to mess with you. Your head starts to mess with you. I remember probably 10 minutes in, it felt like I'd been in there for 2 hours. And I started wondering, like, did they trick me? Did everybody else leave? Am I here alone? And then you start having these thoughts of like, am I ever going to get out of here? You start thinking about your parents and your siblings and like all the people you wish you would have said goodbye to before they left. But the darkness just messes with your head. The darkness just will mess with you. It was 30 minutes. And in those 30 minutes, it just messed with my head. And what the darkness of this world does to you is it messes with your head. The reason that Israel was where they were, they'd been in the darkness for so long that it just began to mess with their head. They really began to believe because of the darkness, God doesn't exist, and if he does exist, he's not a God who's faithful to his promises. They really began to believe we're not ever going to get out of here. We're not ever going to be free. We don't know how to do all this thing. The darkness messes with your head, right? It leads us to doubt and to fear and to anxiety. And so Jesus is telling us something about the world that we need to listen to because I think a lot of us don't really believe that the world is as dark as it is. The world is dark. And then he goes on to tell us something about himself. I am the light of the world. I am the light. That the world is dark, but that I am the light. See, the way that my cave story ended, finally after 30 minutes that felt like 3 days, the guide turned his light back on. And he said, okay, here's what we're going to do next. He said, I want y'all to know there's one way out of this cave. We're not going to go back the way we came in. There's one way out, and I'm going to let y'all find it. And by that point, we all wanted to find it really bad. We were ready to be out of there. We're like, okay, let's find it. And he said, here's the deal. I'm not giving you your lights back. He said, I want you to get on your hands and knees. And he said, I'm going to turn my light off in about 30 seconds. And I want you to know that somewhere around you, I have hid a lighter. Now go. And he turned his light back off. And you have 30 high school guys bumping into each other, like freaking out. And after a few minutes, finally, someone finds the lighter and they flick it. And guess what happened? All of us just swarmed to this guy. Because it wasn't a whole lot of light, but it was enough, right? It wasn't like a spotlight on our head, but it was enough light where we went around him and grabbed onto him. And from that point forward, he was in the front with the lighter. And all of us were just shoulder to shoulder. We all had hold of each other's shoulders so that no one got lost. And it probably took us another hour or two to find the way out because there were all these little caves that looked like the way out and really weren't. And this one guy with the lighter led us all through the cave till finally we saw a little bit of light turn into a lot of light and finally realized there's an opening and we could all get out. And we all got out and celebrated and hugged, and a bunch of high school guys felt like we were alive for the first time. But that little lighter was enough light to lead us out. That one person with the light, that one lighter was enough to lead us out. And when Jesus says, I am the light, he's telling us that the world is dark, but I want you to know that I've come to lead you out of this dark place. I've come to show you that there is hope. And so just like in the wilderness, that there was a light there to show him God's presence, Jesus is saying, I'm the greater light. If you've ever doubted the presence of God in this world, God became a human to be a light for you to show you the way out. That as much as the light in the wilderness was this incredible protection for his people and this incredible sign of power for his people, Jesus is saying, I'm a greater light. That this isn't just about what happened in the wilderness. This is about God becoming a human who's going to defeat your most powerful enemies. And so the pillar of fire can defeat Egypt. God becomes a human to defeat our greatest enemies, sin and death and Satan. See, that's what I've come for. Jesus is saying, I am the light. I'm the one who's going to guide you a step at a time through this. And so the pillar of fire in the wilderness could lead Israel from slavery to freedom a step at a time. Jesus is saying, I'm the human who's going to come and lead all other humans to freedom one step at a time, but you've got to trust me. You've got to see that I am the light, and you've got to grab onto my shoulder and trust that I'm going to lead you and guide you to this place where you're free and to where you're alive in a way that you've never been alive before. Right, so it tells us something about the world. It's dark. It tells us something about Jesus. I am the light. And I want you to notice he doesn't say I'm a light. He says I am the light. Because the world's going to offer us a ton of different ways to enlighten ourselves out of the darkness. But Jesus says, I'm not a light. I am the light. I am the way out. And then the third thing you need to see is that it tells us something about ourselves. I want you to notice the second part of the verse of John 8:12. I am the light of the world. right? It's a statement about the world and it's a statement about Jesus. After the comma, it becomes about us. And it says, whoever follows will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Right? The first part of the verse is about Jesus and about this world. The second part of the verse is a choice that we have. And what Jesus is saying is, I am the light of the world, but you have to decide if I'm going to be the light of your life. I can't make that choice for you. I am the light of the world. I am the one who came to lead humanity from slavery to freedom. But you have to decide, will you trust me enough to follow me from slavery to freedom? That's your individual choice. Do you believe that I'm going to lead you and guide you to this place where I'm going to give you life? And so I want to summarize this. I want to wrap this up. What does it mean to follow the light? What does it mean to follow him? What is our part? And I want to make this just 4 simple phrases, 4 simple applications of what does it look like to follow the light? What does it require of us? See, to follow the light means 4 things. It means that you see the light, that you stay in the light, that you follow the light, and then you become the light. That's the progression that Jesus offers us. That you see the light, and then you choose to stay in the light, and then you follow the light, and then the beautiful part is that we become the light. And what I mean by see the light, you have to actually dig in and wrestle with this idea. Is Jesus the light? Are there other lights that may offer me a way out? Are there other ways of enlightenment? And even if you read the rest of this passage, verse 19 through 30, the religious leaders begin wrestling with, they think they're the light. And Jesus looks at religious people and say, unless you believe that I am he, you will die in your sins. He's saying your religion is not a light at all. Your religion is actually deceptive. I am the light. And so religion is going to offer a light that's not a true light at all. He's going to say in this passage, I came from above, you came from below. Right? There are cultural lights that are going to try to enlighten you and tell you there is provision and protection and guidance found if you just follow these ways out. And Jesus is saying these lights won't lead you to freedom. These lights are actually leading you back into slavery. I am the light. And so when I say see the light, there's this decision that we have to make. Is Jesus really who he claimed to be? And will he really do what he's claimed to do? He's the one who was sent by God, who came here to lead us from slavery to freedom. Is that who he is? And so we see the light. The second step is that we have to choose to stay in the light. And here's what I mean by that. When someone turns the lights on really quickly when you're in a dark room, what do you always want to do? Turn them back off as soon as possible, right? My daughter's down here, and I wake her up that way in the morning. She does not appreciate it at all. Like early in the morning to wake her up, it's real easy just to turn the lights on, say, wake up. And usually if you're the person in the dark, you want to scramble and turn them back off. Why? Because it hurts your eyes. Right? A light turned on when you're in the darkness hurts your eyes. And what I want you to know is that when Jesus begins to shine the light on your life, it may hurt for a little while. When Jesus begins to shine the light on some things in your life that you don't really want to acknowledge and you don't want other people to see, it's going to sting. And you have a choice to make. You can choose, he is the light, but man, I don't know if I want to face and wrestle with all that's exposed when the light hits me. Right? Have you ever turned on the light and seen yourself and then turned it back off because you didn't want to look back in the mirror? Nope, none of you, I can tell. None of you done that. I haven't either. But that's what we're talking about. Right? Light exposes us. And what you have to decide is Jesus exposing you to heal you, or is Jesus exposing you to embarrass you? Right? I think we think that Jesus is exposing us to embarrass us, and Jesus is actually exposing us because it's the only way that he can begin to heal us. And so we have to choose to see the light and then to stay in the light and say, God, I'm going to stay here. Guess what happens if you leave the lights on? Your eyes will slowly adjust, right? It'll hurt for a moment, but then if you stay in the light, your eyes will adjust, and guess what will happen next? You will actually see. You'll actually be able to see. So I think for a lot of you, God's turned the lights on a few times, and you thought he was trying to embarrass you, and you didn't want to be exposed, and so you just ran and turned the lights back off. And God is trying to get you to keep the lights on because it's in the light that you can be healed. It's in the light that he exposes you, not to embarrass you, but he's exposing things in your life that need to be healed. And so we see the light and we stay in the light. And then third, we follow the light. What I love about the story of Israel is it took 40 years for them to be in their land. 40 years. And a day at a time, God didn't get tired of leading the people, even as much as they grumbled and as ungrateful as they were. God committed, I'm going to lead you a step at a time and a day at a time from now until you're in your land. And their whole responsibility was to stay with the light, to follow the light, right? When the light moves, you move. When the light stops, you stop. And so I'm sure there were several times when the people were ready to get moving and the light didn't move and they were frustrated because they were ready to move and yet God stayed still. Then I'm guessing there were times when the light began to move too fast and they were trying to catch up and they were frustrated because the light moved without them and they had to catch up. And for us to follow Jesus, to follow the light, he's going to lead us and he's going to guide us. And we have to begin to wrestle with the times when it feels like he should move and doesn't, and the times when it feels like he's moving way too fast and we want to stay where we are. And our daily decision has to be, okay, God, I want to stay with you. I want to stay in step with you. I want to go where you go. I want to stop when you stop. See, it makes Christianity really simple because it boils down to one thing. What is the next step? What is the next step? Jesus, what is the step you have for me today? It may be for me to stay right where I am and to trust you and to connect with you. It may be that the next step is tomorrow. You have something massive for me to step into, but a day at a time and a moment at a time, God's going to lead us from slavery to freedom, a step at a time, and on this journey that we have to begin to submit to and find beauty in. But he's not a map. He's a guide walking us from slavery to freedom. And then finally, and I wanted to close with this one, especially on Thanksgiving week, we get to be the light. And I wish I could preach a whole nother sermon on this, because if you look at the words of the New Testament, it's really beautiful. Ephesians 5:8, I wanted to show two verses that are just incredible. Ephesians 5:8, look at the way that Paul says this. He says, "For at one time you were darkness, but now you are light." Do you notice what he doesn't say? He doesn't say, "For at once you were in darkness and now you were in light." He actually says, "At once you were darkness and now you are light." He's saying something fundamental has shifted in you, that you're no longer by nature darkness, that the light of the world has come into you and made you light. And I want you to live on this world as light. Jesus' own words in Matthew 5. This isn't just Paul. Paul's actually stealing this from Jesus' thoughts in Matthew 5. "You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." So you see the light, and you stay in the light, and you follow the light, and then the end of this progression is pretty amazing. As we stay in the light, we become the light for other people. And what that means, as simply as possible, is that what the pillar of fire was to the people of God in the wilderness, we become for the world. What Jesus is for us, we become for the world. And so for a world who is wrestling with, does God even exist? That they should look at us and say, you know what, I don't know that God exists, but I see that person and there's something there that gives me hope. For a group of people that wrestle with, is God faithful to his promises, that they would be able to look at our lives and say, you know what, I don't know about that, but in the same way that the pillar of fire convinced the Israelites, and in the same way that Jesus convinces us, we're meant to convince people God exists and he's faithful, he's good. We're to be the people who are the ones that stand in for the powerlessness, those who are without power, those who are vulnerable. We begin to step in and say, you know what, there's a God who cares about you. There's a God who protects the vulnerable, who steps in, and we become those who are a voice for those who have no voice. We're to be the wise guides who help people walk from slavery to freedom a day at a time. All right, so the end of this progression is not just stay in the light and follow the light. The end of the progression is actually what God has always wanted for humanity, which is that there are little images of God all over the earth to spread his glory, to spread all that he is everywhere, that we get to be the light. And so this is how I want to close tonight. I want you to just stand up with me, because I want to close with some time to worship together. And especially in light of Thanksgiving, I just felt so compelled that we would just press into this, that I think it's going to be easy this week, especially in light of all that 2020 has been, for Thanksgiving just to feel strange, because I don't know that there's a lot of us who just feel like overly thankful for where we are in life right now. Right, and it's easy to even look back and say, like, man, I remember the good old days. I remember there were times before that felt good and felt right. I'm going to thank God for those. And what I want us to do tonight is to begin to not only say thank you to God for what he's done in the past, but to really ask God to help us believe that all of this is true and that there are far better things in front of us than behind us. And say, God, you know what? I'm going to show gratitude for you because you are the light of the world. These things that you said are true. You've come to show your presence to me. You've come to provide for me, to protect me. You've come to lead me, to guide me. And I'm going to be grateful on the front end that even if I don't know where you're going and how it's going to play out, I want to be grateful for that. And so I want to ask you to bow your head and close your eyes. And I want you to just have a little conversation with God right now. spend a few seconds here. Just thank him for his provision in the past, for big things and little things. Like Terrell said earlier, spend some time just for a few seconds telling God thank you for all his faithfulness in the past. And now I want you just to shift your focus to who God is right now, to who he's always been, and the light that shines on the future for us. That God has always been a God who longs to be present with his people. That God is a provider. That God is a protector when we feel weak and vulnerable. That God is a guide from slavery to freedom. I want you just to spend some time now thanking God for the promises that he's made, and for the faithfulness that he showed us in Jesus, that he's come to lead us from the darkness into the light. Revelation 21, the Bible actually ends with these words, "I saw no temple in the city, for its temple was the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb. And the city had no need of the sun or the moon to shine on it. The glory of God gives it light, and its lamp is the Lamb of God. By its light will the nations walk, and the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it. And its gates will never be shut by day. There will be no night there. They will bring it into the glory and the honor of the nations." So, Father, we thank you tonight, not just for all that you've done in the past. We are so extremely thankful for all of that. We have a million different evidences of how good you've been to us, and so we do say thank you. But Lord, we say thank you for who you are right now, for who you've always been, the faithful protector and provider and guide of your people. We place our trust back in you again, Lord, that you are the light of the world. You came to lead us from slavery to freedom. And as the darkness begins to mess with our heads, as the darkness fills us with doubt and fear and anxiety, we run back to you and say, God, you are faithful. Jesus, you are our way out. Spirit, you live within us to lead us and to guide us. And Father, we want to be those kind of lights, human beings in your image that are meant to show off who you are. We love you and we